Hi, how are you? This is Dr. Damaris Maria Grossman, and this is the Mindfully Integrative Show. So today's mindful chat is with Clint Davis. He's a licensed professional counselor. He's an Army veteran, family man, marriage counselor, and much more. And I really am excited to have him on the show because I want you guys to learn a little bit about him and what he's doing for society and in the integrative health space, shall I say. But for much. So please say hi and what's up to Clint Davis. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. Super excited to be here.
I'm really glad that you took the time and you had some moments. I know that everybody's time is very precious. So, as I tell people, kind of what's a little fun fact or something that people don't know about you?
Don't know about me? That's a hard one. I'm a pretty open book with a lot of things, but I would say for your listeners, probably, and I talk about it on a lot of my podcasts, but I love jujitsu. So that's something that I do that, a lot of people don't assume therapists do. So self-defense, jujitsu.
Well, you're a
I enjoy.
veteran, so you're Army, so you got to be tough.
That's right. Yeah. So that would be a fun fact. Yeah.
Do you do jujitsu with your family? You have kids or
I have two kids. Yeah. Two
yeah,
boys.
do they do
Uh,
it also?
we do at the house, and then my oldest has come to class a few times. It's just trying to squeeze it in between violin and soccer, and so right now it's just not going to
Oh,
be that season where we're able to show up to class very often. But we do a lot of stuff at home and just play around and have fun with
that's
it and
cool.
wrestle, and yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, it's nice to get like another avenue of outlet. So that sounds fun.
Oh,
He
absolutely.
does violin too? Do you do violin also?
I do not. No, no. I sing for fun in the shower, but other than that, I don't play any instruments. Yeah, he started violin about 2 years ago, and he's my oldest. He's really good at it. So
That's cool. Yeah, I'm,
fun.
I'm not musically inclined either. My husband
No.
is, but not so me.
Yeah, my wife helps him. I'm like, I don't know what's happening in here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm love to kind of dive into your journey. I call it integrative health, but really kind of your transition from just the traditional thought and, as a licensed counselor and where you've come along the way. If you'd like to kind of dive into that, either your path, like where your path started and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. I mean, I'm from a really small town in Louisiana, kind of all white community, real poor, typical kind of Southern. And my mom was always worked at the Baptist Convention, which is Louisiana Baptist Convention here in Louisiana. So I was always plugged into church. I'm the oldest, and so my parents divorced when I was about 8. And so I just always felt like kind of holding it together, trying to figure people out, trying to hold the family together. And so as I grew up in high school, people would come to me, with their dating problems or their issues. And I don't know, I just always had the personality to try to meet with people and talk and try to help them. And I was always very sensitive. And that led to me joining the military, as we talked about before I was on. And second week of basic training was 9/11. And then 2 weeks after that, or 2 years after that, I did Afghanistan. And then I was in the Superdome for Hurricane Katrina.
I think we
And
were
so,
in at the same time. We
yeah,
both were enjoying that fun military years.
oh my gosh, those 6 years were something else in our country, and just
Yeah,
happened
yeah.
to sign up. And so,
I
as
know.
you,
I feel like I was in the same time. I'm like, oh, we were in the same time. It's fun times, fun times.
yep. And so, yeah, so I had PTSD from that, a lot of trauma. What revealed to me was that I had trauma before that, right? I had all this childhood stuff going on, and so I started getting into counseling, and it just really fit with everything that I wanted to do. And so after I got some healing, I was like, I really want to go back. So I went to Fuller Theological Seminary in California, in Los Angeles, and I loved that. Came back to Louisiana, back to my hometown or home, and ended up in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is where I'm at now. And to be honest, the integrative part was understanding and seeing people as a whole person, their mind, their body, their spirit. We weren't really, as psychologists and therapists, you're not really trained a lot to ask spiritual questions and to ask, kind of a belief system questions. And as I got trained in trauma, I was confused because you're talking about getting to the root of things when you're looking at trauma. And
Right.
yet, so many people's beliefs shape their thoughts and feelings, which shape their actions. And what I found was that so much psychology and church and everything else, religion, was so heavy focused on behavior modification. And so that was my first, like, wait a second, the thing that helped me in therapy was getting to my roots about what do I believe about God and myself and other people, and really dig into the deep stuff, not treating the symptoms, although the symptoms get treated. And then we had Grady, who's my oldest. And so I was doing therapy and doing work and doing trauma therapy. Well, he had what's called FPIES, food protein induced enterocolitis syndrome. And so he had really bad food allergies. And so he would eat something at 6 months old and start vomiting for about 4 hours and go into shock. And he did that a couple of times. He almost died. And so we started having to try to figure out what was going on. And that opened, my wife had done natural birthing. And so we went through this Bradley method. And that was my first really like, oh, the medical profession treats everything like a symptom and not necessarily like a natural thing that's supposed to happen. And so then when we had Grady, we were trying to play, backpedal from all the things we had been doing. And it was just, there was no help. And so we would go, 3 hours to Dallas and do food trials and try to figure it out. And so that's when we started doing craniosacral therapy and started looking into some other more integrative, more core treating health options. And so as I was starting my private practice, I was like, oh man, we definitely need to do this for people. Like, people have miscarriages and then the doctors don't check on their mental health. People have food allergies. Not one time in the 2 years that we were searching for help, having anxiety, having panic, having depression, sleepless nights, fearful for our kid, hypervigilant for him, going to eat something and get something somewhere and die. Not one time did anybody ask me if I wanted counseling. And so I was just like, man, this is just, everything's so siloed and so segregated. And so as we built up the practice, I was like, just meeting with doctors and like, hey, do you want to be a part of our team and somebody who I can train you in trauma, and you can be more trauma informed in your room and trauma responsive in your room. And then that'll give you a lens to be able to see that person holistically. And also for me, from a Christian perspective, love them, see them as made in the image of God. And then that way you could maybe advocate for them to go to therapy. And if they had a miscarriage, you could ask about their depression or their anxiety because you would understand where it came from. And so then a chiropractor and a doctor and a pediatrician and dietitians. And so we have, multiple of these people on our team and in our offices, so that our therapists can refer back and forth and we can see the person as a whole person. And so that's the short of it.
Oh, I love it. I mean, that's so beautifully. You came up to realize that there was a change. One, because your family, and then two, because you now are incorporating it within your office and trying to like see these other. You're connecting the dots that aren't always there. So you're going this doctor and that doctor and saying, hey, why don't we have the conversation instead of them looking at an EHR, right? Like,
right.
They're trying to say, you know what I mean? Instead of it's like, all right, well, I'll go see the cardiologist and all right. But hey, maybe there's something else going on. And I had like just a small tidbit of what you're doing with your son. I mean, my son didn't have that extreme illness, but he had a really bad eczema, and I had to change
Oh
I
yeah.
had to change my pediatrician because
Us
the
too. Yeah.
pediatrician didn't understand that what we were putting, like he had a severe dairy allergy and a soy allergy, like the allergy was significant that it would mess his neurodevelopment. And I had to go to a completely different doctor because they, if you're not going to someone that gets it, you're like, oh, okay.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because they don't intentionally shame you, but what they end up doing by not understanding trauma and not understanding how the brain and the body works for the people who are going through this stuff is that they invalidate you, which then just makes the whole thing worse. It's
Right.
kind of medical gaslighting. It's just,
So sad.
oh no, you're not, it's just a bellyache. Oh, it's just normal rashes. It's just normal this, or what are you not doing?
What are
And
you
it's,
not doing? Right. And
yeah.
then like taking the blaming. And I'm listening to your story and I go, oh, I don't know, this little passion project show just came. I think it was like, I got to talk to people that have been, because I feel like everybody has like some story that changes
Oh
their
yeah.
view. And I'm like, you got it. So it was your son. And then also probably for you, your trauma.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it was I mean, that's the Lord has been very good in making, beauty from ashes, using my childhood sexual abuse or my childhood trauma or divorce or, verbal abuse or whatever I've been through, war,
Mhm.
to help me do therapy, recover from that, make it make sense, and be able to kind of, share that with other people and support one another. And for whatever reason, not be afraid to, kind of talk about those things in the open, talk about mental health, talk about um, our struggles, because we all have them. And so many of us just feel so burdened and chained down by feeling alone and isolated. And I'm the only one with this thing. And unfortunately, as you know, if you're not integrative, then that's what the systems do. They
Yeah.
keep you in this little box, and they move you to another box, and that person sees you in that box. And that's not how God sees people. He sees them as a whole, and as a whole being, mind, body, and soul. And so I see that movement in America. Thank goodness. I see there's people like you and people out there that are working hard to help people tell their stories and to be able to give people hope. So it's super encouraging.
I appreciate like talking with you, because what I like is what I'm hearing is you're saying that not putting people in boxes. And I would love more of the conversation with all providers or parents or family members to be able to feel comfortable saying, well, what else can we do? What are other, what's the whole picture here, without the ego or the negativity,
Yeah.
and that conversation is so important. I know that you don't just do, counseling. I know you've done trauma, and you said you have many certifications. Would you like to talk a little bit more about what you're doing, that you've done with your therapies?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Yeah, we do. I'll just kind of go through what we do. I'm a
Sure.
certified sex addiction therapist, which is a CSAT. And so if we look at the last 10 years of what's gone on in our society between social media, technology, and just advances in culture, you know, the I use the church as an example a lot, but if 15 years ago you did a Bible study with 10 women or 10 men, the statistics in that group would be very low for addiction, for depression, for anxiety. There'd be people that had clinical issues,
Hmm.
but it'd be two out of 10. And if you do a group of any kind now and you have 15 women in there, 12 of them are going to have clinical anxiety. And if you do a group with men, 75% of them are going to be addicted to pornography. And those are the stats that we see. And so the problem is that we've been doing the same thing, the same way of treating, the same way of teaching, the same way of forever, but the world has drastically shifted in the last decade, and we just haven't
Hmm.
caught up. And so one of the things I spend a lot of time doing is educating parents on how to protect their kids, their 10 and unders, especially from sexual abuse. I mean, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men is sexually abused by 18.
Mm, so sad.
That's a
That's a
devastating
huge,
statistic.
huge amount.
And so when we look at the children and we look at their statistics, and that the average child views pornography before 9, before puberty, and they're not just looking at porn, they're looking at very, very aggressive, violent things. If we look at, these children are coming out of a house of divorce, and so they have that trauma. They have this whole host of things that we didn't have 15 years ago, ravaging our. My thing is prevention. Like, how do we support each other as a community and educate parents on parenting and on protection from technology and protection from abuse and these things? If we know they're happening at a staggering number, then we need to be attacking how it's happening. And so that's what I spend a lot of time doing. I have my own podcast called Asking Why with Clint Davis. And the goal of it is to get down to the root answers of different subjects. So if we talk about human trafficking, or we talk about parenting, or we talk about marriage, it's like, let's really talk about it from a practical perspective. Let's use the best parts of psychology and the best parts of theology and really get down to how can we change this and how can we prevent this for the next generation. And so that's one of my biggest passions, and what we're doing is just teaching and educating. And I have a talk tonight, a parenting seminar for parents, 0 to 10-year-old, with 0 to 10-year-old kids. And I just really enjoy doing that stuff. And then we're all trained in EMDR. So we do eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So that's kind of a trauma tool that we use. And the newest thing, which I haven't really announced, but I'll say it on here, I'm getting certified right now in equine therapy. So we work with horses, to incorporate horses into trauma and recovery. I've done a lot of that work myself personally. And so I've hired a therapist to come in and kind of run that program. And then 2 or 3 of us are going to help kind of launch that program. So we hope
That's
to use that as a
amazing.
way. Yeah.
I went
It's
to
been
one
awesome.
for myself too, with for trauma, like military too, and Oh, it was so, I mean, I didn't know how much the horses feel us.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I went for me. Yeah, it was for me.
Yeah.
I've been, and I was just like, whoa. But I'm a big animal. Like I'm very animal sensitive. So I loved it. But yeah, that's really cool. That's a really, I didn't realize how they just are, they feel us.
Yeah, definitely. If anybody's interested, they should Google equine therapy and kind of look it up. And the last thing I would say is that I'm also the director of recovery for a ministry called the Hub Urban Ministry. And so we have the Love Well, which is for poverty, so men and women in poverty and children in poverty. So we have a place where they come and they eat and they take classes and they can get education and they get, free things, but they have a card that they earn points on that gets them to be able to do those things. And then we have Purchase Not for Sale, which is to help women and families out of human trafficking. So we partner with local law enforcement, the FBI, and we have a program that I help write that lets these women go through a year program where they get counseling, they get recovery, they get all the support and meds and things they need to then be able to get it. And then the next year is them getting a job and getting equipped with those things. And so my practice helps with that counseling needs and that
Amazing.
support too.
You're really busy.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate that word. I don't know
Busy
if
in a
you've ever,
good way, though. I mean, I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
busy, you're right. You are very active and doing all these like
Active. That's a
entrepreneurial,
good way.
like nonprofit for profit. There's so much wonderful work that you're doing.
Yeah. It's definitely the Lord. Like I said, I feel very blessed in the sense of getting to use my story and my experiences to shape for good things instead of what they were doing in my life, which is shape for bad. I mean, I went through 4 or 5 years of drinking and drugging and women and porn and all the things, not knowing that, those were all just coping mechanisms to cover up my pain. And I think once I realized, that God loved me unconditionally and was there for me, and that so were other people in my life, that's where I really found that freedom to go, hey, let's not be ashamed. Let's stand and tell this story and give people hope. So
I think that's amazing. Do you have an inspiring quote or mindful way that you want to, I would say mindful way, but or tip that you want to share with the audience?
yeah, I think what people really have to do is like I said earlier, we have to all realize, if you're listening to this, that you got to get underneath your thoughts and feelings and really get to your beliefs. And so your beliefs are things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not pretty, this always happens to me, I'm a failure, I'm broken. And what I like to do is, my two are, I'm not good enough and I'm unknown. And so for me, I go into scripture, I go into whatever truth is out there for people, and I write that down, and I write next to it what's true. Because if you're a human being, you have intrinsic worth and value. You're secure in God's care. There's nothing you can do to lose that. There's nothing you can do to earn that. That's just a truth. And so anything that says you're bad, you're not good, you're not worthy is a lie. And so what happens is, I used this example Monday with some teenagers I was talking to. People take about 15 teenagers take about 15 pictures of themselves before they post one, right? Before they find the right one.
Mhm.
And the problem is that it's not that we take that long. It's that 14 times out of 15, we said, you're not enough. So every picture that we look at, we light up that neural pathway of I'm not enough, of shame, of dopamine, of negativity in our brains. And
Oh,
then we post one picture. And so what I would challenge people mindfully is, hold your thoughts captive, but you have to know what your thoughts and your beliefs are. So you can't fight the core and rewrite your story if you're not willing to lay and look and go, okay, man, I really say these horrible things to myself. And what you'll come to find is, really, it's only 2 or 3 things that you say to yourself in all the content. So it could be about sex or money or parenting or career, but you're going to say those 1 or 2, 3 negative things in all those areas, which is amazing to be able to capture those, like, I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, you know, and then really laser focus in on those every day. What about that why do I believe that's true? Where did that come from? Where's the first time I heard that?
mhm.
And then have other people in your life speak against that. Say, hey, I'm really feeling not good enough, or hey mom, I'm really feeling ugly. And then you have God telling you that you're not ugly, you have your mom telling you, your friends telling you, and then you have to tell it to yourself. And what that does is, instead of building up that negative neuropathway, you're building up that positive neuropathway. And your automatic response starts to be, when someone posts something or says something or has conflict, it doesn't start to affect your worth and value and identity. It starts to say something about their unhealth. And the healthier you get, when somebody's being unhealthy, instead of being offended by that, you go, man, this person's in pain. It has nothing to do with me. So how can I love that person? Because they obviously don't love themselves. And the cycle starts the other direction. Now, I'm not saying that's a perfect thing, but you start to
Right,
be
of
able to do the
course.
right thing 7 out of 10 times instead of 2 out of 10 times.
But the fact that you're having the conversation of you're looking at something and I mean, you just think about it, that negative thought, it's just like, oh, that person posted that. Oh, that's so me. And sometimes you're just like, how do I change that pattern? You know?
And you have to stop and you have to get past the thought into, what do I believe about myself, about God, and about other people? And if you don't identify those things, then you're just in a loop of behavior modification. So you white knuckle it for a while and you do good. But the moment there's a conflict, it brings you back to that 5-year-old self or that 10-year-old self when that thing happened that you've never really dealt with or repaired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's so true. I could not agree more. Changing the patterns is so important.
Yeah.
I would love to know how we can get to reach you in your office, on your website, or and such. How can those listening and those watching get a hold of you, Clint?
Yeah. You could go to our website. It's www.clintdaviscounseling.com. And you can find all of our therapists on there. You can book a speaker. I go all over the country talking about all these things. You can go to any, really, however you get your podcast, whether it's YouTube or iTunes, or if you have an Android product, it's asking why with clintdavis.com, or not .com, but just asking why with Clint Davis is the podcast. So however you get your podcast, that would be on there. And we're about 50 episodes in, and we cover a lot of topics like we're talking about today. And I have guest speakers in. I'd love to have you on it one day. I
Sure.
love the reciprocation of like kind of getting to go back and forth and tell each other stories. That's really important to me. So those are the main things. If you want to email me at clintdaviscounseling@gmail.com, that's another way. And then we have Facebook and Instagram. So you can go to
Cool.
Clint Davis
Yeah,
Counseling.
I will definitely have all your notes in the show notes. I'll have your information. But if there was anything recently coming up in the next couple months or so, or if there
Yeah.
you let me know.
Yeah, I mean, we do a podcast every Wednesday that launches on
Awesome.
Friday. I had Dr. Caroline Leaf on last week, which was a really, I don't know if you know who she is, but she does a lot of neuropsychology stuff, and she was great. So
Okay.
people want to look to that. And sometimes I'll branch off and kind of do a little talk. I did the Dark Night of the Soul last week. So just talking people through what it's like when we really hit that darkness and that wall and that depression, and how they can get out of it. So,
Great. I love it.
but yeah,
That's
absolutely.
awesome. Thank you for, putting on that podcast and for also just touching others' lives and trying to incorporate a different way of thinking so that they can do better in all of your areas of therapy. Thanks
Absolutely.
again for being on the show. And I know that those listening are appreciative and will reach out to you in some manner and
Yeah.
will be listening and hope guide them in a good and more positive direction. So I
Yeah. I hope
wanted to
so.
say for those listening, and thank you, Clint, for coming on the show today.
Absolutely.
And those on the show, make sure each day you have a mindful way. Thanks again for coming on, Clint.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
I appreciate your time.
Yeah.